Have you ever heard of the warrior queen who brought the Roman Empire to its knees? A woman whose name became a symbol of defiance, courage, and a desperate fight for freedom? Today, we're journeying back almost 2,000 years to uncover the incredible true story of Boudicca, the Celtic queen of the Iceni tribe. This isn't just a tale from a dusty history book. It's a saga of betrayal, vengeance, and a rebellion that set Roman Britain ablaze. Our story begins around 60 AD, in the land we now call East Anglia, England. This was the home of the Iceni, a proud Celtic tribe. For a time, they lived in a fragile peace with the mighty Roman Empire, which had invaded Britain years earlier. The Iceni were what the Romans called a client kingdom. This meant their king, Prasutagus, was allowed to rule his own people, but he was ultimately allied with and subject to Rome. To secure this arrangement and protect his family, Prasutagus made a fateful decision. In his will, he named the Roman emperor as co-heir to his kingdom, alongside his own two daughters. He hoped this would guarantee his wife, Boudicca, and their children would be safe, and their kingdom would remain intact after his death. He couldn't have been more wrong. When Prasutagus died, the Romans saw an opportunity not for partnership, but for plunder. They ignored his will completely. Instead of honoring the agreement, Roman officials annexed the Iceni lands, declaring them Roman property. They seized the estates of Iceni nobles, treated the people like conquered subjects, and plunged the tribe into debt. When Boudicca, now a widowed queen, protested this treachery, the Roman response was horrifically brutal. The Roman historian Tacitus tells us that Boudicca herself was publicly flogged, and her young daughters were violated. This wasn't just an insult. It was a profound act of humiliation designed to break the spirit of the Iceni and shatter their royal line. But it didn't break Boudicca. Instead, it ignited a firestorm of fury. The Romans had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They had underestimated the Celtic sense of honor, their loyalty to their queen, and most of all, they had underestimated Boudicca herself. The humiliation she and her daughters suffered became a rallying cry. She was no longer just a queen. She was a mother seeking justice, a leader whose personal tragedy mirrored the suffering of her people. Boudicca, described by the historian Cassius Dio as tall, terrifying in appearance, with a fierce gaze, and a harsh voice and a great mass of reddish-brown hair falling to her hips, began to gather support. She wasn't alone in her anger. Other tribes, like the Trinovantes, were also groaning under the weight of Roman oppression, particularly the construction of a grand temple to the former Emperor Claudius in their capital, Camulodunum, which they were forced to pay for. The time was ripe for rebellion. With the Roman governor, Suetonius Paulinus, and his main legions away campaigning in Wales, Boudicca seized the moment. A massive rebel army formed around her. Imagine the scene. Thousands of Celtic warriors, men and women, fueled by years of resentment and a thirst for vengeance, united behind their warrior queen. Their first target was Camulodunum, modern-day Colchester. The city was a symbol of Roman power and arrogance. It was poorly defended, full of retired Roman soldiers who had taken the best land. The Celts descended on the city like a tidal wave. They showed no mercy. The city was sacked and burned to the ground. The inhabitants were slaughtered, and those who sought refuge in the temple of Claudius were besieged for 2 days before meeting the same fate. A Roman legion sent to relieve the city was ambushed and virtually annihilated. The message was clear. Roman rule was not invincible. The news sent shockwaves through the province. The next target on Boudicca's path was Londinium, the bustling commercial hub that would one day become London. Suetonius Paulinus, the Roman governor, raced back from his campaign, but he quickly realized he didn't have enough men to defend the city. He made the cold, calculated decision to abandon Londinium to its fate in order to save the province as a whole. The inhabitants who couldn't flee were left to face the wrath of Boudicca's army. Just like Camulodunum, Londinium was burned and its people massacred. The same fate befell Verulamium, today's St. Albans. In a matter of weeks, Boudicca's rebellion had wiped out the 3 most important Roman centers in Britain. Archaeologists today can still find a thick red layer of burned debris under these cities, a physical scar left by Boudicca's fiery campaign, known as the Boudiccan destruction layer. Ancient sources claim that as many as 70 to 80,000 Roman citizens and their allies perished in the uprising. The Roman province of Britannia was on the brink of collapse. Suetonius Paulinus knew he had to make a stand. He gathered his remaining forces, about 10,000 men, a mix of legionaries and auxiliaries. He was heavily outnumbered. Boudicca's army had swelled to a massive host, perhaps over 100,000 strong, though ancient numbers are often exaggerated. But Suetonius was a skilled general. He chose his battlefield carefully, a narrow gorge, with a forest to his back, preventing any surprise attacks from the rear. This would force the massive Celtic army to funnel into a narrow front, negating their numerical advantage. Before the battle, both leaders addressed their troops. Suetonius reminded his disciplined soldiers of their training and the glory of Rome. Boudicca, riding in a chariot with her daughters, gave a powerful, impassioned speech. She declared she was not fighting for wealth or power, but for lost freedom, for her battered body, and for her daughter's innocence. It was a choice between victory or death. The battle, known as the Battle of Watling Street, began. The Celts, confident in their numbers, charged forward in a massive, disorganized wave. The Romans held their ground, protected by the terrain and their large shields. They waited until the rebels were close, then unleashed a devastating volley of heavy javelins, called pila. The pila punched through the Celtic shields, weighing them down and causing chaos in their ranks. Then, the Romans advanced in their classic tight wedge formation. The disciplined, heavily armed legionaries carved their way into the Celtic horde. The confined space turned the Celts' greatest asset, their numbers, into a deadly liability. They had no room to maneuver. To make matters worse, the Celtic army had brought their families in wagons, parked at the rear of the battlefield, to watch what they assumed would be a great victory. As the Celtic warriors were pushed back, these wagons blocked their escape route, turning the battlefield into a death trap. The Roman victory was total and ruthless. They slaughtered everyone they could, warriors and civilians alike. Tacitus reports that 80,000 Britons fell, with the loss of only 400 Romans. And what of Boudicca? The historical accounts differ. Tacitus says she poisoned herself to avoid being captured. Cassius Dio claims she fell ill and died. Whatever the exact cause, her death marked the end of the rebellion. The dream of a free Britain was extinguished. In the aftermath, the Roman retribution was severe. Suetonius Paulinus led a brutal campaign of punishment across the lands of the rebel tribes. However, his methods were so harsh that a new imperial official was sent to Britain, who adopted a more conciliatory approach, realizing that peace, not just force, was needed to govern the province. Boudicca's rebellion was a failure in the short term, but its impact was profound. It served as a brutal lesson to Rome about the cost of arrogance and the importance of respecting local customs. They never again pushed the Britons so far. For centuries, Boudicca's story was largely forgotten, buried in the texts of two Roman historians. It was only during the Renaissance, and particularly in the Victorian era, that she was rediscovered. Queen Victoria herself saw a kindred spirit in this ancient warrior queen, a powerful female leader defending her empire. Boudicca was transformed into a national heroine, a symbol of British liberty and fighting spirit. The famous statue of her riding her scythed chariot, located near the Houses of Parliament in London, was commissioned during this time and stands today as a powerful monument to her legacy. So, Boudicca's story is more than just an ancient battle. It's a timeless reminder that oppression breeds resistance, and that the desire for freedom and justice can inspire ordinary people to do extraordinary things. It's a story of a queen, a mother, and a warrior whose fiery spirit burned so brightly, it left a permanent mark on the pages of history. What do you think? Was Boudicca a hero fighting for freedom, or a brutal leader responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey into the past. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's most fascinating stories. See you next time.